take charge of your career and find a job. So this one is going to be as informative as the last, if not more. I just wanted to begin by saying I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri people, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present. So for those people who don't know me, who weren't here last week, my name is Josephine Mifsud. I'm actually based at the Sunshine Library. I'll begin by just introducing Tanaz Byramji. She's an experienced career development practitioner, and she's had over 10 years experience providing high impact career coaching and practical support to help people achieve their career goals. She's worked with clients from a wide range of industries and professions, assisting them with identifying career goals, finding new jobs, negotiating promotions, and returning to work after a career break. She also provides advice about different education and training options and helps people navigate new types of work such as contracting, consulting, and even setting up their own business. So Tanaz draws on her extensive experience and current knowledge in providing practical, relevant advice about how to write effective resumes and cover letters, and finding jobs and how to apply for them, prepare for interviews, network effectively, change careers, and much more. This whole process of finding work is a very complex exercise. So Tanaz has the experience that you need, and I will hand over to her now. Thank you, Tanaz.
Thank you very much, Josephine. It's nice to see some familiar faces from last week and a couple of new ones as well. I hope that means that last week was quite informative. As Josephine said, this is the second out of our 3-part workshop that Brimbank Libraries is putting on for us. Okay, so today we are talking about taking charge of your career. Now, taking charge of your career is almost the same thing as talking about what is success. So very often we tie work with image of what success looks like for our lives. And that's quite normal because the average person spends about 90,000 hours at work over their lifetime. So whether it's right or wrong, our sense of identity is closely linked with career success, with the type of work we have and whether or not we find it fulfilling. And we all have a different idea of what success is. It can be happiness, it can be satisfaction, fulfillment, it's a pay rise or a promotion, a leadership role or work-life balance. So regardless of what you think it is, you need to take charge of your career to achieve it. And there's 2 ways really that we're going to talk about taking charge of your career today. The first is around how you find a new role, where you find jobs, how you manage that application process, etc. The second is around how you actually manage the job that you have and the career that you have. And that's quite important because we often get caught up in this cycle where when we need a new job, that's our primary focus. But once we get that new job, we stop working on our careers. And then we find ourselves caught in this cycle every 3, 5, 7 years, whatever it looks like, sometimes even less. We end up having to find a new role, or we find ourselves becoming less fulfilled with the role that we have. And that doesn't have to be the case. You can progress and achieve career satisfaction by managing your career, whether you're in a role or whether you're applying for a new role. The problem is we're almost conditioned to assuming that a manager, a teacher, a mentor, someone else is going to manage our careers for us. And for those of you who are part of the workshop last week, you might remember I mentioned the fact that we don't stay in the same role for 7, 10, 12, 20 years at a time anymore. Very often we're moving on from roles much quicker. What that means is there's no single entity, single person looking after our career as a whole. So now that's on to us. The challenge is no one's ever taught us to do it. So there's a number of instances where we can lose control of our career, and it's really critical that we can regain it. This often is what precipitates a change in career, needing a new job, etc. This often happens after career break, when seeking a career change, when your employer changes, when companies restructure and you're made redundant. It can happen when you've been in the same role for a very long time, or it can happen when you go through a life-changing personal event. So we're going to talk today about 6 key areas and ways of taking charge of your career. The first is around planning, the second researching, the third networking, the fourth is managing, the third is searching for new roles, obviously, and the fourth is applying for those new roles. I will let you know now, we're not going to talk in detail about how we prepare our resume and our cover letter. We will be talking about that next week. So let's talk about planning first. Planning is really important. Don't jump into a reactive response to a change in your circumstances or a need for a new career or a need for a new role. Very often we're driven to say, I've got to get a new paycheck. I've got to make the next lot of payments. That is absolutely imperative, and I'm not belittling any reasoning behind that or any need to do that. It is important, but we do tend to jump into the next available job, often exactly the same type of roles we've done previously or something we feel very comfortable doing because it's an easy fit. You're more likely to be guaranteed success in the interview process, and you're more likely to be comfortable in doing that type of work. However, that's not really managing your career because it's not giving you room for growth, and it's not giving you the time and the headspace to actually plan out what your next career move should be. So the first step is you've got to reflect on where you've been. You want to work out what you've done, the type of experience that you have, and then use that to inform what you do and don't want to do in the future. So consider what you want your future to look like, and not just in terms of what your job needs to look like, but how your job fits into your whole life. A lot of my colleagues talk about this thing called life design. All that really means is saying, okay, we now acknowledge finally that you've got careers, you've got education, you've got families, you've got elderly parents that we're caring for, other people that we look after. We've got our interests and our hobbies and our passions and the things that are important to us. They don't have to sit in little boxes. You can actually bring them all together, but your job underpins a very large proportion of that. If you don't choose the right type of work and take the time to find it and put all of your energy and effort into that, you end up becoming quite stagnant. And 10 years can fly by, and you end up feeling quite dissatisfied or concerned that you haven't potentially achieved what you wanted to achieve. And that doesn't have to just look like a progression or a promotion. It can be, well, I wanted to travel, but I didn't get around to doing that big trip, not just because of COVID now, but because I didn't set aside the time and the money to be able to do that, and things like that. So it's really important to consider what you want your future to look like when you're considering what type of work you want to do, whether or not you want to change roles at all if you're fortunate enough to be gainfully employed, and what type of work, what type of organization, what sector, and what the function of your role should be. When you're planning your next career move, whether that is staying in your current role or applying for a new one, it's really important that you take some time to audit your skills, your capabilities, and your experience. You can plan until the cows come home, but it's not going to mean anything unless there's some functional actions that you take. So the first functional action you can take is work out what it is you can do, what it is you have knowledge of, what it is you are capable of, and what experience you've got doing that. I've got an exercise I'm going to show you in the next slide, which is a really easy way to capture that information. Once you've audited your skills and your experience and your capabilities and your knowledge, and you've got that down on paper, you then have to consider what's your value proposition. Now, that's just a really fancy way of saying, what is it that you have to offer an employer that makes you a better candidate for the types of roles you think you want to apply for, or the role you currently have? What is it that makes you better at it? What is it that makes you the best person, the best fit? And that value proposition, we'll talk about that, how you develop that in a moment, but it's where everything comes out of this. You have to recognize for yourself what it is you bring to an employer, what it is you bring to your current employer and future employers, and you need to learn to explain what that is clearly and succinctly. It forms the basis of your resume. It forms the basis of your cover letter. It forms the basis of your interview. It was also really important once you're in a role to know what your value proposition is and how that changes, because most of us in our roles, we have performance evaluations or appraisals, whether that's after the 3-month probation period in a new role, or whether that's a 6-monthly or an annually thing you do as part of your work. If you don't know what your value proposition is, you're relying on your manager or your supervisor or your team leader to tell you, and they're not going to. That's not their job, and most of them aren't trained well enough in leadership to be able to identify that. It's up to you to advocate for yourself. And the first way to do that is to be able to identify and articulate what you bring to the table. The last part of your planning process is to set some goals and develop an action plan. Now, this is a process you can undertake at any point in your career. It can be when you're applying for a new role. That's one of the best times, but it's also a good idea to do that once you get into a new role. It's a good idea to challenge yourself and keep yourself accountable and do it for yourself once a year. And we'll talk a little bit more about exactly how you go through that process. So the first step is that skills audit. A skills audit is a great way to capture everything you have to offer in the workplace, and it should take into account all of what we call your relevant career assets. That's your skills, what you know, what you've done, so your experience and your capabilities. Now, your skills and knowledge, these can be technical skills, they can be soft skills. Think about when you're auditing what your skills are, think about what you can do well. Think about the things people come to you for, both personally and professionally. Are you the person people come to when they need a database built? Are you the person they come to when they need a letter written? Are you the person they come to when they need to punch a hole in a piece of leather because you've got great tooling skills? Are you the person that they come to when they need to work out, my elderly father had a fall and is now in rehab and I need to find out what community services are available? Are there things you inherently know? Not just because of that's part of your job, but maybe because you've got lived experience. Maybe it's something you're particularly passionate about. So I challenge everyone to really think broadly about what your skills and your knowledge looks like. It doesn't have to be just, I work in retail as a retail supervisor, so my skills are, manning the till, processing transactions, merchandising, making sure all the shelves look nice and neat and appealing, and ensuring that my team members provide quality customer service. They are all skills, but they're not the only skills that a retail person or a retail assistant has to offer. They can be coaches of local sporting teams. They might volunteer to work in a local community organisation. They might be a migrant who has lived experience of what it's like to move countries. They might be someone who speaks another language and therefore has great linguistic skills. There's lots of other different facets that people bring to play, and you can think laterally about your skills and your knowledge as well. If, for example, you do martial arts as a sport or a hobby, there's inherent skills that are required in a sport like that. Things like working effectively autonomously, being very disciplined, working well in groups. There's lots of different skills and competencies that are all relevant in the workplace. And for those of you who were part of the session last week, I talked a lot about skills and soft skills versus technical skills, and the fact that it is those soft skills, those human skills, that are most important. If you are in a technical role, if you work on the tools, if you work in a particularly, I don't want to say technical again, but a particularly skilled area, which is specialized, such as if you work in a lab, if you work in nursing, if you work in pathology, if you work in the food sector, you have specific skills that are relevant to those sectors, which is important as well. So if that's the case, you might want to divide this column further into two and turn it into your technical skills and knowledge and your soft skills and knowledge, or your human-centered skills and knowledge. Then you fill in your experience. That ideally should be where you provide evidence of where you've used those skills. So your experience column needs to be where you start to capture specific examples that prove that you have those skills. Again, those examples don't have to be only related to your work, although it would be ideal if those come first. Make sure you draw them from every facet of your life, however, because that provides the evidence that you can do what you say you can do. You need to provide that as the foundation for your resume as well. So it's a really important activity. And then the third column is your capabilities. We often forget when we go into the workforce, when we pitch ourselves to recruiters, even when we're in a performance evaluation, we forget about what we can do. What we can do is really key if you want to stretch, if you want to progress, if you want a promotion, or to facilitate a career change. We know if we look at a job ad that you can do maybe 60 to 70% of what the role requires. You can do it, but maybe you haven't done it before. Now, you might be able to successfully apply for that role based on the fact that you can have done something similar. But here is where you have to put that down in writing. What can you do that is based on your skills, based on what you know, based on your experience, but not exactly what you've done previously? And there you can be a little bit aspirational. You can think about the types of roles. So if you go back to that planning exercise, when you look at the types of roles you want to apply for in the future or want to secure in the future, try and align your capabilities with those. So let's talk about goal setting very quickly. Most of us have been taught at some point or other to set ourselves some goals. We often, however, make those goals very difficult to attain. There's no point in setting a goal if you can't achieve it. So the biggest takeaway I want you to have from this slide and this part of the presentation is that when you set yourself goals for your career, make them achievable. That's the most important part. When we talk about goals, we talk about making them specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Now, all that means is pick something that you can actually get done and make yourself accountable for it by putting a time frame about it. Make sure it's realistic. I can really do that. It would be great to put down, for example, if you wanted to move into psychology, it would be great to put down one of your goals is I want to become a psychologist in 8 years. But if realistically you can't spend 6 years out of the workforce studying, or it's for whatever reason you're not going to be able to get there, you might want to break that goal down. It could be, I want to develop knowledge of what psychology looks like. It might be, I want to engage in a short course or a diploma program in counseling to take steps to get there. When you're planning your next career move, don't make your goals completely unattainable, because it just becomes frustrating for yourself and you end up getting bogged down and saying, you know what, this is too hard. I'm just going to stick with what I'm doing and what I know, and I'm not going to stretch and challenge myself. Now, the next step, researching. Knowledge is key when you are managing your career. It's really important that we find out as much as you can about your industry and your profession. It's a good idea to do some research about companies, organizations, sectors, and industries that you're interested in and might consider working for. And what's really important to note here is that this is important whether you are employed currently or not, whether you want to facilitate a career change or you're quite happy in the industry that you're in. The people who generally progress and secure the type of work they want, whether that is a promotion or whether that is being able to negotiate with their employer, you know what, I'm a really strong candidate for this role. I've been doing it well for the last 2 years. I want to work from home 2 days a week. When you go to your employer and want to negotiate something, whether it's a pay rise or flexibility, or you want them to invest in a short course for you, it's great to have some market knowledge. It's a good idea to understand and know what you're worth. It's a good idea to know what other people in the industry are doing. You can only do that if you immerse yourself in your job. And that's relevant even if you're warehousing, for example. You can work on a forklift and be a picker and a packer. And you might be quite happy doing that for the next 10 years. But you also are more likely to be the person to get the favorable shifts, to have a good rapport with your supervisor, if you have some interest or understanding of what it is that you do and a passion for it. And if you don't, it's a good way to explore different careers. So some of the things you can do in the research phase is you can join industry associations, you can sign up for podcasts and blogs that interest you, you can attend conferences and webinars in your industry area or the area that you want to move into, and you can look for growth opportunities. As we discussed last week, look for those areas where there are emerging roles that are related to the type of work that you do, and just keep an eye on what's happening there. Do we have any questions at this point? Nothing yet? Okay. All right, the next step in the process is networking. Now, what do we know about networking? Well, your network is actually made up of anyone and everyone you come into contact with, whether that's through your personal life or through work. Very often people complain, oh, I didn't get that role because I just don't have the networks. I don't know enough people. Most of us do actually know enough people. We just don't know how to build and leverage our networks. It's a really key career skill. It gives us an opportunity to put our hands up for new opportunities in the workplace. It's an opportunity for us to add to that research base, what we know about our career and our industry. The first step, if you're looking at navigating a career change or managing your career over time, once a year, I recommend you sit down and you actually write down who is in my network. You can keep that online or you can keep it offline in a notebook, doesn't matter. But make a note of everyone you come into contact with and have some engagement with. So that could be a colleague, suppliers that you deal with, managers, your vendors, your clients, people who mentor you or who mentor others. They can be customers, they can be friends, they can be role models that you aspire to or admire. They can be influencers. So if you go back to that research piece, say, for example, you're interested in starting your own business and you listen to entrepreneurship podcasts. If there's someone who's being interviewed, then add that person, find out what their name was, make a note of it, go and find them on LinkedIn, follow them, see what they're up to. In doing so, you've added them to your wider online network. Whether or not that will result in a job opportunity remains to be seen, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But at the end of the day, you need to start somewhere. Another place to look at is your teachers, people who have taught you, people who've got other industry networks. Even if you do a short course, see who it's facilitated by and offer to ask that person if you can add them on LinkedIn. If there's someone who you particularly gel with, the other way to maintain your networks is to send people emails on a semi-regular basis. It could be that you, I don't know, maybe you managed a birthday party or a wedding, and you really enjoyed working with the event manager at a particular venue. Now, you might not want to work in event management at this point in time, but maybe you want to go into marketing. If you remain in contact with that person, even if it's every year or every couple of years, you send them a quick email, hi, how are you going? I work in marketing. It'd be really great to have an understanding about what's new in your space. Demonstrate an interest in what other people are doing. That's the best way to build your network. So your network is your greatest professional asset, regardless of your occupation. So what exactly is it? It's critical to your career success because 20% of roles belong in the hidden job market. Now, that hidden job market, I know it sounds very secretive and elusive, but really the hidden jobs market isn't hidden after all. It's all about passive and active networking. So that's what we're talking about here. It's where you hear that phrase, oh, I didn't hear about that job because so-and-so knows X, Y, and Z, and they heard about the job even before it was advertised. So they got to put an application in before I even had a chance to do so. You can't hear about opportunities if you're not talking to people. And it can be really difficult to talk to people if you're at home and you're not employed at the moment. So starting online is a really great way to develop those relationships and at least have a starting point, people to start talking to. Networks are good because they can be made up of your current and your previous colleagues, co-workers, peers, and friends, as we've discussed. And to build your network, you want to make sure that when you meet people, you take note of who they are and what they can do. If you come across someone as part of your research or you hear them speaking in the interview, as I said, look them up on LinkedIn. And then when you are searching for a job, you can utilize those online networks. Say, for example, you're applying for a role at a particular company. You might look at your LinkedIn network to see if you know anyone working there. You could then contact that person and ask them for some insight into their company, into the culture, their working experiences there. You can mention that you spoke to someone from that organization in your cover letter. So say, for example, you want to work for Western Health and you happen to see on your LinkedIn network that you know someone who's worked at or currently works at Western Health. When you see the job advertised, a good way to start building those networks is to reach out to that person and say, hey, look, I know you've worked at Western Health for X number of years. I'm looking at applying for a role there. I'd love to find out a little bit more about your experience working there. What's really important to that organization? How did you feel about working there? If you're a nurse, for example, you might ask, what's nursing like there compared to anywhere else that you've worked? Or if you're looking to pursue a career change, say, for example, you want to move into accounting and you're going to start out by becoming a bookkeeper. If there's anyone who you know who works with an accountant or for an accountant or in bookkeeping themselves, they'd be your first port of call. You contact them and say, look, I'm interested in changing career direction. I'd love to find out a little bit more about what you do. Then you be strategic about who you choose when you network. Ideally, you want to network with people who've got contacts and the reach and the scope to potentially consider you if an opportunity becomes available. So, but you never want to ask them for a job. You want to ask them for advice, for insight. People generally love to provide that information. Very unlikely that you can say to them, hey, I really want to work for Western Health. How do you think I should get a job there? That's never going to work. What you do want to be able to do is when that job does come up, you want to be able to say, oh, I know Renee works at Western Health. I'm going to have a chat to them about that job, see what their thoughts are. I'm going to apply, and then I'm going to add Renee's name in the cover letter. Or alternatively, maybe Renee will think of you when they know that they need someone new on their ward. And while again, some organizations will have to go through the standard recruitment process, if that person has heard of you or knows your name, there's going to be some even what we call unconscious bias towards you if your name is recognized to them. And you can only do that if you're starting to build that network and at least engaging in that networking activity. It doesn't mean you need to be best buddies with everyone in your network. I think that's what people forget, and that's what makes this a really confronting and challenging idea, this whole concept of networking, is that, oh, you have to be going out for drinks with X, Y, and Z, and you have to be catching up for lunch every so often with the CEO of this organization or that. That's the only way you'll ever get a job. It's not quite the case. People recommend people, but people like talking to people as well. You don't need to know them very well for your networking activity to have any meaningful value. Okay. What's another way to build your network? Connect with the recruiters and hiring managers who are listed as the key point of contact for a particular role. That's a really important one and a great way to at least build your LinkedIn network. Most roles do have when they're listed by a recruiter, do have the recruiter listed. Find them on LinkedIn, connect with them. At least it's another touch point, another way to be visible, to become a preferred candidate. Okay. So the other thing that's a really important way to manage your career. Oops, we've missed a slide. I apologize. Okay. Managing your career. Moving on to the next step of this whole taking control concept. As I said before, managers, supervisors, God, your parents, anyone, your husbands, your partners, your wives, your significant others, the other people in your life, no one else is going to manage your career effectively. This is up to you. So one of the ways you can do this that we aren't taught is to continuously evaluate your own performance. It's to consider where you are in your career and constantly challenge yourself to, am I doing well? Is this something I enjoy doing? Is there something I need to do to grow? Being in a role generally is the best time to evaluate your performance, not just when you're applying for a new one or exiting an old one. Very often that's what we do. We have to write a resume, we look at what we've done in the past and we consider, okay, what can I put in my CV that matters? What demonstrates my expertise? What I really encourage clients to do, and I really like to see everyone doing, is managing their own performance on an ongoing basis. You are usually employed more hours and days of your life than you are not. So this is the phase you're in the majority of your working life. To manage your career, you nurture it like a plant, not the way I nurture plants. I generally kill them. So I do much, much better with careers. I hope you all do the same. What I do want you to remember is don't expect your manager to do it. Take the time on a regular basis, put it in your calendar to evaluate your performance against those goals you set. Consider this, are you filling skill or knowledge gaps of your own? Look at your peers. What are they doing? How are they progressing? Seek out opportunities, look at your workplace and say, is there something I could get involved in? Is there a project that's coming up? I don't have project management experience, but how do I get that experience in the workplace? I won't get it because I can't go work on that project because my manager says I don't have experience. Don't get caught in that hamster wheel, the chicken before the egg thing. You can't do a new job or a new thing because you don't have experience doing it, and you can't get experience without doing the job. When you're in a role, that's the best way to get this experience, is to say, okay, there's that project over there. I can't actually lead that project or deliver it, but I would like to shadow the person who's doing it. I'd like to be involved in some part of it. Maybe you've got great admin skills. You ask your manager, can I please sit in on those meetings? I'll take all the meeting notes. I'll prepare all the relevant documentation. I know that maybe Sarah is responsible for corresponding with all the stakeholders on this project. Can I help Sarah so that she can focus on what she needs to do by helping develop these documents for her, by taking all the notes, by collating the files, by making sure the email addresses are correct, etc. Leverage the skill you've got and see where it can be used on the project that you are interested in or in the work that you're interested in stretching towards. And then that gives you exposure to what, for example, Sarah is doing. And it gives you an opportunity to then chat with her and assist with other parts of the projects once you've proven that you can support and assist. Very often the challenge is, oh, but I'm so busy doing my work, my manager doesn't want me to go and do something else. This is where articulating your value proposition is really important. You need to show them how it's important to them that you develop these new skills. You need to be able to say, okay, if I learn more how to do that, I'll be able to take away this knowledge and add it to my current role. It makes me better at what I do. Say you're working in retail and there's a brand ambassador who comes in from head office every couple of weeks. Maybe you're interested in moving into marketing. Ask to shadow and speak with that brand officer or that brand ambassador when they come into the store. Follow them around. Talk about how merchandising affects customer experience. Those conversations are all adding value. They're proving your expertise and mean that you've got a much greater chance of being promoted or giving the opportunity to secure some new experience. Another way you can build and stretch your career is to offer to help train or mentor a new starter. And make sure that you're open to your manager. Explain that you want to progress your career or learn a new skill. And again, relate it back to why that's beneficial for them. And be strategic in the performance appraisal process. We often sit back in a performance appraisal and say, okay, we just need to make sure that we continue to keep our role or maybe secure the incremental pay rise or pay grade that is part of the set standard, the set process that your employer follows. Use your performance appraisal process as a two-way street. It's not just about proving to your manager that you've done what needs to be done. Use it to set new goals for yourself. This is a great way to embed that stretch experience in your current workflow. Say, look, I need project management experience. That's what's going to keep me engaged. It's going to make me a better employee. I'm going to improve my time management experience by doing that, for example. Relate it back to what's beneficial to your career path, but make sure there's something in it for you as well, professionally speaking. Another thing that you can do is keep a career journal. It's a really good idea every quarter to just keep a basic document that has the date, the month, and say in the last quarter, this is what I've done. This is who I've worked with. These are the things I've learned. These are the issues that I've had, the problems that I've solved. A big thing a common occurrence that happens amongst my clients is they tell me, well, I came up with a really great way to manage that problem. Maybe it is resolving an overload of work or a legacy issue, something that happened before they came on board. And they have a great suggestion and they put it forward and it falls on deaf ears and it doesn't get put into play for whatever reason. There's lots of other things that happen in the workplace. There's politics, there's managers who feel threatened. There are specific ways of doing things that you can't change no matter how much you try. Don't let that prevent you from making the suggestion. And put that suggestion in your career journal because you can use it to document as part of your achievements for the role. List the projects you've worked on, discuss the skills you've used and what you feel you've achieved. That career journal means that when you do go on to apply for a new role, you're not starting from scratch and saying, I've got to think about what I did for the last 3 years and I've forgotten because all I did was I did my work and I did it well. This will take the pain and the stress out of that process. Keeping a career journal helps you create and identify your achievement statements. I will talk about that at length next week. But it goes back to what I was saying about understanding your value proposition. Your achievement statements summarize what you did, how you did it, and what the outcome was. And you need them because they're the most important part of your resume and your interview process. Achievement statements are examples that provide the evidence to prove why you're able to do the work at hand and how you do it better than others. And that how is really great for a new employer to see what you would do for them and the value that you would bring. Achievement statements are also really great when preparing for performance evaluations because whether you're a picker packer in a warehouse or a secretary in a medical center, you should have an opportunity to have a performance appraisal of some sort. And these statements can help you build a case if you want to negotiate a pay rise or promotion. Let's talk briefly about job searching. So there's two types of job seekers. There's active and passive. There's also two ways that jobs are listed or known about. We talked about the hidden job sector previously, which you generally access via networking. That accounts for about 20% of roles, but about 80% are currently advertised online. You'll find them on Seek, Indeed, Career One, and of course LinkedIn and a whole host of other websites. You'll find them listed by recruiters on company and organization websites. You'll find them listed by industry and job-specific application boards. And then there's those, for example, Vic Government's careers.vic.gov.au. There's the not-for-profit sector, which has got pro bono jobs. There's a plethora, a whole host of different providers, but those jobs are predominantly found online. So what you need to start doing is be really active, and if you are looking to find a new role, consider the types of roles and the employers you'd like to work with and start following them on LinkedIn. Add them on a Google alert, which I do think we mentioned last week for those of you who weren't part of the session. If, for example, you want to move into bookkeeping or administration, say administration in the pharmaceutical sector, you'd like to work for one of those big pharma firms or a healthcare organization, what you do is you set up a Google alert. You literally Google how to set up a Google alert, and it'll walk you through the steps, and set up an alert for when jobs are potentially listed or come up on websites, say, for example, Western Health or Pfizer or CSL or St. Vincent's Private, whatever organizations you might be interested in. It gives you a bit of a head start so that you know when those roles are about to pop up. Here are some common places where you'll find jobs listed online. These are, I think it was about the top 20 job boards listed this year. It is by no means an exhaustive list, but it's a good place to start. And I've added in the careers.vic site for Victoria Government. And also there are other providers like Employment Max, there's Brimbank JobLink, and those are the employment service providers. So you really have a number of different groupings and categories for where and how these jobs are listed. And you'll often find that they're listed in multiple places. One of the things that I strongly recommend you do, which we'll talk a little bit about next week, is to ensure that your application complies and gives you the best chance of meeting the requirements of a role. When you find something listed, for example, on Seek, go to that organization's website if you can recognize it. So if it says we've got a job opening with Racing Victoria, go to Racing Victoria's website as well. Look at their careers section and see if there's anything listed there. Very often they'll have additional information, or that's where you might find the position description, which is a lengthier, more detailed overview of the role that's outlined in the job advertisement. Okay, so how do you search for roles? You do your research, well, you've done it by now. You're listing the places you might find jobs, you're setting up profiles on your job boards, and now you need to search by keywords. Do not search for a role by the role title. So don't say administration officer and expect every job that you might be interested in to come up. Make your broad search terms as broad as you possibly can. Combine, go back to your skills audit and combine your skills, your knowledge, your capabilities, and your experience, and string those search words together. Use 2 or 3 at a time and plug them into those online search boards. For example, communication, customer service, retail. Put those into a job search field and see what comes up. You'd be surprised at how many of those roles, A, you don't know about, so it's a great researching exercise, but B, you hadn't realized you'd actually be qualified for or have the experience to fulfill that utilize the skills that you've got. And you haven't been able to find those roles before. Another example, you could put in sales, business development, and IT if you want to go out and sell software applications, for example. If you work in warehousing, you might put in specific processes. So there's DIFOT, which is a warehousing process. You could put DIFOT, inventory, store person. If you work in construction, you might have OHS, construction, project. Another example, if you're an electrician, you want to move into managing facilities, you might go electrician, commercial, troubleshooting, facilities maintenance, because those are the core requirements of those types of roles. So as I said, searching for roles is a great research exercise because it's a good way to get a sense of what other roles are out there and what you could aim for. So you can tie that back to your planning process, what the market's doing, so you know how much you're worth, where there are future opportunities, what current salaries look like, and lots more. It's really a great exercise, and it can become a bit of a rabbit hole, but it's worth engaging with. And then the next step is applying. And we will talk about this in detail next week. But here are the steps you've got to follow. As I've mentioned before, once you find the job ad, don't stop there. Look for that position description. Find their website. Look for an About Us or a careers section. Search for that same job listing. If the job is listed by a recruiter, contact the recruiter. Follow them and search for them on LinkedIn. Follow the same process. Go and see on their website, that recruiter's website, what they've got listed for that role or anything similar. I haven't got it in the list on the slide, but if a recruiter is listed for a role, or anyone actually as a contact point, it's a really good idea to actually contact that person. Now, it can be dicey because they'll have lots of people trying to contact them. It can be difficult to get through to them. The best way to build your network with build your relationship with the recruiter and build your network and give yourself a better chance of applying for the role is to, however, get in touch with the person who's listed for that as a particular point of contact. Ask them a smart question. Do not ask them something that can be answered by the position description. Look for something in the job ad that it doesn't tell you about and ask that question, whatever it might be. Then, if possible, so step 1, introduce yourself. Step 2, ask a smart question. Step 3, leave them with a little piece of information about yourself that might align really well. So you might ask, okay, this is an admin, say particularly with recruiters' jobs, very often they're quite vague. They won't tell you who the job is listed with because that's with their clients, that particular company, and they don't want to list that openly. So say, for example, you call up and they say, oh yeah, that is an admin officer role for, and if you ask what sector is it for or who's the client, which organization, they might say, oh, it's with a leading healthcare provider, or it might be with a major metropolitan hospital. You can then leave them with a little piece of information like, oh yes, well, I've worked with X, Y, and Z, or I'm well aware that St. Vincent's and Western Health and whoever else, Monash are all recruiting in this space. I've got a really good understanding of ABC, or I know about this software application. Whatever it is, latch on to one little thing that is going to help convey your value proposition and leave them with that. That's great. Thank you very much. This is going to really appeal to me because of X, Y, and Z. I'm going to send an application in, and that's it. That gives you a little bit of a point where you can follow up after you've submitted the application as well. Okay, so make sure you have all the information and apply using a tailored resume and cover letter. That is really, really important. Do not send out generic applications. And then you've got to prepare your application toolbox. So applying, there are lots of different steps in the application process. The first thing to do is to develop what I call an application toolbox. It's a really good idea to have what we call a master CV. So you know that career journal and that skills audit, those exercises, they all turn into your CV. When you keep a career journal, it's a really, really valuable way of saying, okay, I've done all of these things. Now I'm going to capture it and write it formally in my master CV. Your master CV captures everything. I strongly recommend that you make sure you divide your experience for each role into what you were responsible for. So what you did, you keep that section shorter. And then your longer section is your achievement statements. What demonstrates how I did all of those things? So say you're an admin officer. It could be that you managed correspondence for a team of 6 partners. What did that involve? Okay, so yes, you managed correspondence. What types of documents did you develop? How often did you have to manage those documents? Was this on a daily basis? What was the volume? What was the scope? Give your reader an indication of how much you did, how complex it was, what you did to manage it. And in doing so, you can create an achievement statement from something that you think was just part of your day-to-day role. You build all of that out into your master CV. And then when you have your master CV, you look at the CV that you've got and you look at the requirements for the role that you want to apply for. And you say, okay, here's all the commonalities. Here's all the proof that I can do what they need me to do. Here's all the evidence that I have done it before. And I know here in another highlighter, here are all the things I can do, even if I haven't done it before. If you meet 75% of the job requirements listed, you can apply for the role. Do not get caught up into the idea that you have to meet every single requirement. There are some caveats to that. If you are applying for a government role in particular, where they list an essential criteria is, for example, a tertiary qualification, it can be quite difficult to get around that. However, for the most part, unless it's listed as absolutely essential in a really formal looking position description, you've got a very good chance of securing an interview, even if you don't meet all of the requirements. What you do need to be able to say is I can meet 75% of them. Off the remaining percentage, here's what I can do. Here is what I need to do to be able to do it. So it could be that you need to learn a new software package. So in your resume, you'd identify, okay, they need me to learn this new software package. I've never used it before. Where have I done that previously? How can I show that I've got the underlying skills to do what needs to be done for this particular job? So it might be that you are looking at bookkeeping and you've got experience using, pull things out of my hat here, you've got experience using Excel and they need you to use Xero, for example, another software package. You can say, in this role, I had no prior knowledge of using Excel and in 6 months was able to go from a beginner user to a highly proficient user, able to manage multiple spreadsheets with thousands of entries. Then you can use that, and you can use that as an achievement statement because it demonstrates that you can learn new software applications quite quickly. You keep that in your resume, and in your cover letter, you address the things that you don't meet. I can do X, Y, and Z. However, I'm aware that you are also looking for me to do A, B, and C. While I haven't done A, B, and C, I have done D, E, and F, which utilizes the same skills. And I'm confident I would therefore be able to do A, B, and C for you with very limited lead time. More importantly, I have this unique combination of skills and experience, which make me a really great candidate for the role. So you make sure you address those employment barriers. Don't use them as a reason not to apply. With the example of tertiary experience or tertiary qualifications, that's something that you can, for example, navigate by saying, well, I don't have a tertiary qualification in this space. I have 15 years of experience. And that's not enough. However, you do have to join the dots for a recruiter, an employer, or an HR manager. At that point, you say, because I've got 15 years of experience, and then you run across to, say, one of the university websites and say, okay, they needed someone with a bachelor's of social science. Why? And you think about what's required for the role, and you say, okay, these are the subjects that study under a Bachelor of Social Science. If you can, and this is quite a lengthy process, but it works. Most importantly, it really works. You then reference in a paragraph in your cover letter, while I don't have a tertiary qualification, I've got 15 years of experience, and over that time, I've developed expertise or skills or knowledge of, and list some of the subjects that would potentially be listed for that qualification. It's all they're trying to do is, when they put together a position description, it's a wish list. It's got lots of inputs. You've got your direct hiring manager. You've got the area manager, if it's a large retailer or a brand. You've got HR overlaying that. So if there's an HR department, it might be, yeah, that person really should have this, and maybe they should have that. And so you've got lots of people inputting into this. Even the recruiter might have input into the position description that goes out, or the job ad. So with all of those inputs, it really becomes more of a wish list. And that's often why people will say, yeah, my position description says that, but 6 months into the role, that's not really what I'm doing. And that's really common. Remember, the job process, it is inherently human, even if software plays a big part in it. So you've got to work with the system and understand it and provide the evidence in your application that proves that you can do what you say you can do, and proves that how you do it, because that how will show the person who's evaluating your resume and your application, okay, she's done this here. This is the process she takes to do it. That's what I need her to do for me here. It joins the dots for them. And that's really important. If you make the process easy for the recruiter, for the employer, for the hiring manager, you have a much greater chance of successfully securing the role. You follow that process across your cover letters, your resumes, your criteria responses if you're applying for the public sector, and in your networking process. So again, when you're networking, you need to make sure that you've got some set pieces of correspondence, some little snippets, say for on LinkedIn, when you've contacted a recruiter, you've got a little email, pro forma email that you tailor for that person. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with me, or thank you so much for reviewing my application, or whatever it might be. I appreciate your time, and that's it. It's just that little touch point. But the little pieces of correspondence are really important as well. And last but not least, if you want to manage your career effectively, you've got to invest in it. You have to invest time. You have to invest resources, and that can be money. Very often the money associated with investing in your career is around professional development. It's around saying, I need to do some short courses to continue to maintain my skill level, to expand my skill level. We come from 7 to 10 years ago, it was very, very common for an employer to invest in your professional development. It was built in as part of the process. You had to send that person off for a course in this. That happened because we went through a really huge change as well in terms of software and digitization driving a lot of workplaces. The existing workforce didn't have the skills, so employers were compelled to go out and secure that training. In this new slimlined agile world that we're moving into in terms of employment, we really have two types of employers. One is the employer who wants to be considered an employer of choice, who's going to give you all of those training opportunities. And the others are going to be the ones to say, I've got a thing that needs to get done. And as an employee, you are a resource. You come to me as a package. The person I don't have to invest in anymore is the person I need right now. So if you want to fulfill those roles, you need to identify what types of skills they need and show them that you're constantly upskilling. So there's an investment factor there. And lastly, you can invest in your career in terms of getting support to manage your career. You can find mentors. So there are formal mentorship programs. Industry associations have mentorship programs as well. You can engage a career consultant or a career coach. You can go to some employment advisory services for those who are long-term unemployed and actually utilize the resources available there. I can't tell you the number of times even I've been engaged by an organization to provide coaching to clients, long-term unemployed, and those who are only recently made redundant, and they don't utilize the resource that is provided. If there is a resource available, use it. It's there for a reason. Gather as much information as you can. Don't get caught in that hamster wheel of constantly doing the same thing again and then feeling unfulfilled as a result of it. And that's enough from me.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to go back to that activity that you discussed earlier on about the skills and knowledge, the experience and the capabilities. Now, you said that the capabilities should be aspirational.
They can be.
Yeah, okay. Could you just give me perhaps an example or something? Because just to help me.
Okay. Yeah, something that's really simple and aspiration could be that you want to manage teams and you haven't managed teams before.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can break that down further. So if you think about it then, okay, I want to manage teams or I want to supervise teams. What are the skills that I need to be able to do that? Some of them you will already have. So you need to communicate effectively, but some of them you might need to develop as well. So it's when you do look at your capabilities, you've got to look at both sides of that coin. It's not as simple as saying, I can do that, although that is where you start. You can say to yourself, I could lead a team. Can I do it right now? And often, very, very often, the fact is you can, you just haven't had the opportunity to do it. And that's where that stretching comes in. And the other thing that I didn't mention around stretching and building out those capabilities is that once you've identified what you can do and how that lines up with what you might want to do work-wise, you can also look for volunteering opportunities as well, even if they're short-term. Say, okay, I haven't managed a team, but I'm going to jump on a site like Seek Volunteer or Good Company. .com.au, and I'm going to manage a Make-A-Wish team, developing brochures for them, or manage one project for the Starlight Foundation, and I'm going to show them I can manage people. So that's another way you can then use the capabilities as a launch point. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. That was very helpful.
Can I also suggest something, Tanaz? The other thing too is maybe mentoring, Bri, so that you have a one-on-one opportunity to see how you manage that kind of relationship. And then if you like, build on that. So you can start with one person as a mentor or a coach and progress to bigger teams or bigger groups of people as well.
Thank you for that.
That's okay. Now there's also, Vic has asked, how do you find blogs, etc., for your career?
Okay. I think Vic was in on the last session. If you haven't realized by now, I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the first place I would look, because you can, if you use Facebook or any other social media, you know that you can the social media works out what you're interested in. LinkedIn gives you an opportunity to actually put that into the filters. So your news stream on LinkedIn can be based around certain hashtags now or certain keywords. So the first place, if you're looking for blogs, is to go on LinkedIn and say, okay, I'm interested in entrepreneurship, or I'm interested in supply chain, or I'm interested in import, export, international development, and use those hashtags and follow those channels of information. They will come into your main news stream. Read about it. From there, you'll get all sorts of blogs coming in. So for example, I'm a woman in business. I work in that space. I find that a lot of the things I read and that catch my interest are from, I think it's Women's Agenda, which is a particular news source. So then I will follow that blog, whether I choose to do that from my browser, or whether I use the RSS feed, or whether I choose to do that on LinkedIn. It doesn't really matter, but that's where I find a lot of those blogs. Again, use your networks. If you want to move into a different space and you know someone in that space, ask them, any blogs that you find really interesting that I could potentially listen to, or read, any podcasts, we used to call them industry journals 15 years ago. There are very few industry journals out there anymore. It's all been replaced by this, but the content is there. And YouTube channels is another really great space. Look at reviews on YouTube channel. That's a really great way to determine if you think it's a valid source. Use your keywords. Look at the YouTube channel reviews, and those that you find that have got really high subscription numbers, lots of views, great comments, follow them for a little while and see if they interest you. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you, Tanaz.
Oh, good. So look, thank you so much, Tanaz. That was really a very good session again. It's going to give people lots of homework, if you like, to do for the next session next Thursday. So thank you everybody for your attendance, and I look forward to seeing you all next Thursday with Tanaz as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye-bye.